The rescue. Snow clung to the branches like sleeping spirits as dusk settled over the pine-covered ridges of the frontier. The wind whispered low over the frozen creek, carrying the distant cry of wolves. Elias' heart knelt by a half-frozen track, fresh, small, human. He rose slowly, rifle cradled in calloused hands, and followed the prints where they veered off the path, leading deeper into the trees. His breath fogged the air, steady and quiet, as he moved. A hunter's gait, the quiet confidence of a man who lived alone but never aimlessly. Then he saw her, a woman, blanketed in torn furs and stumbling through snowdrifts, emerged between the trees like a ghost. Her hair was dark, braided in the Navajo way, though tangled now, and her skirt was soaked from the waist down. Her eyes locked onto his for the briefest second before she staggered and fell. Behind her, the howling rose again. Elias raised his rifle. 3 wolves circled close, their eyes gleaming with hunger beneath the half-light. He fired once, clean, deliberate. The echo cracked like thunder. The lead wolf yelped and darted off. The others followed, spirits dispersing into the trees. Silence returned. The woman looked up, breathing raggedly. Elias approached without a word, pulled off his wool coat, and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched at his touch but didn't speak. Her fingers were raw and shaking. "Can you walk?" he asked. A nod. No more. Together they moved, slow and stumbling, through the trees toward the single chimney plume rising from Elias's cabin. As they walked, Elias stole cautious glances at her. The cut above her brow, the dark welt on her wrist, the way she kept her eyes forward but never quite on the trail. The cabin welcomed them with silence and warmth. Elias pushed the door open and stoked the hearth until the fire roared with life. He fetched a blanket, a tin cup, and hot broth. She sat by the fire, hands cupped around the drink, lips barely moving. "My name's Elias," he said, crouching beside her. "This is my place. You're safe now." A pause. Then, softly, "Tayan." She spoke the name with the weariness of someone who had not said it aloud in days. Elias nodded once, respecting the silence between them. He offered no questions, only quiet gestures, a folded blanket, a seat by the fire, bread warmed on the hearthstone. Tayan didn't eat much. Her eyes lingered on the flames, unfocused. Occasionally, she winced when shifting her weight. Her boots were soaked through. Elias set them near the fire to dry and left her with thick socks in their place. Outside, wind scraped across the walls like claws. But inside, it was still. The storm of the wild had been replaced by something quieter, a fragile calm. That night, Elias slept in the rocking chair, rifle within reach, eyes half-closed but alert. Tayan remained wrapped in the blanket by the hearth, unmoving. At one point, just before midnight, she turned to look at him. "Why did you help me?" she asked, voice barely a breath. He opened his eyes, thought for a long moment. Didn't seem right, leaving someone to the wolves. She studied him, then turned back to the fire. Her profile glowed in the flickering light, sharp and beautiful and tired. No more was said. In the morning, Elias stepped outside to fetch water. The snow had deepened overnight. Clouds hung heavy above the pines. He paused when he saw the tracks, multiple, heavy boots, coming up from the trail and stopping just short of his cabin door. Then he heard it. Voices. Low, murmuring. Angry. Elias turned. Over a dozen settlers stood at the tree line. Sheriff Wallace among them. And Ruth, his fiancée, wrapped in a navy shawl, her expression unreadable. He stepped forward, slow and cautious. The sheriff raised a hand. "Elias," he said, "we hear you brought someone into your cabin last night. Someone who doesn't belong here." Elias's jaw tightened. She was being hunted. She needed help. "She's a Navajo woman," the sheriff replied. "The treaty's fragile as it is. We don't need another scandal." Ruth didn't speak. Her eyes met Elias's, but she said nothing. No accusation. No defense. Elias glanced back at the cabin. Inside, Tayan waited. Outside, judgment gathered. The cabin stormed. Tension pressed against the cabin walls like the weight of fresh snow. Elias stood on his porch, eyes scanning the silent crowd. The sheriff's tone had been measured, but the meaning beneath it was clear. The settlers did not come to reason. They came to judge. And Ruth, wrapped in her navy shawl, stood a pace behind the sheriff. Her silence struck harder than any accusation. "I won't turn her out," Elias said finally. "She was in danger." "Maybe," Wallace replied, mounting his horse. "But now you've put everyone else in danger too. The tribe sees this wrong. There's no telling how they'll respond." The crowd began to murmur, then retreat. The sheriff cast one last look over his shoulder. "Be careful who you keep close, Elias." As the settlers melted back into the woods, Ruth remained behind. She stepped forward without speaking, her boots crunching lightly in the snow. Elias watched her, uncertain of what she might say, or what he should. "I brought you bread," she said, her voice calm, too calm. She handed him a small cloth-wrapped bundle, and a book you left at the church. Elias took both. "You didn't have to come all the way out here." "No," she replied, "but I did." They stood a long moment in silence. The wind tugged at her shawl, but she didn't flinch. "She's inside?" Ruth asked. Elias hesitated. "Yes." She nodded, then walked past him into the cabin. Tayan stood near the fire, shoulders stiff, wrapped in the same wool blanket Elias had given her. She turned as Ruth entered, and the two women locked eyes. Neither bowed, neither smiled. The air inside the cabin grew heavier. "I'm Ruth," she said, voice clipped, polite. "I'm Elias's betrothed." Tayan didn't respond immediately. Then, with a calm grace, she said, "Tayan." Ruth gave a tight nod and turned to set the bread on the table. "You're safe now. You should go home." "I have no home," Tayan replied quietly. Ruth's fingers froze for a second on the cloth bundle. "I'm sorry," she said after a pause, though the words were hollow. Elias entered behind them, the weight of both women pressing in. He moved toward the hearth, tending the fire with a practiced hand, hoping to shift the moment without words. "I can take her to the mission," Ruth offered. "She can rest there." Tayan's jaw tightened. "I'm not a charity." "I didn't mean—" Ruth stopped herself. Her composure cracked, just briefly, before she turned to Elias. "She can't stay here forever." Elias didn't answer. Tayan returned to her seat, eyes lowered now, the warmth of the fire chasing the cold from her skin but not from her bones. Later that afternoon, after Ruth had gone, Elias stepped out to chop firewood. Each strike echoed through the clearing like an accusation. He didn't notice Tayan step outside until her voice cut through the rhythm. "She loves you." Elias paused, axe buried in the log. "I know." Tayan stepped closer, arms crossed under the heavy blanket. "And yet, she looks at me as if she already knows she's lost." He turned toward her, surprised. Tayan met his gaze, unblinking. "You say nothing, but everything is clear." Elias dropped the axe. "You don't understand what this is." "I understand better than you think," she said, voice steady. "I'm married to a man who speaks more to horses than he ever did to me." The words hung in the air, sharp and sad. For a moment, there were two people standing on opposite ends of the same quiet despair. "She's a good woman," Elias murmured. "And yet you didn't stop me from staying," Tayan replied. She walked past him, back toward the cabin, leaving the words behind like footprints in fresh snow. That night, a soft snow began to fall again. The fire crackled low, casting flickering shadows on the log walls. Elias sat in his chair, book open but unread. Tayan moved around the cabin with the quiet grace of someone who no longer felt like a guest. She set down a wooden bowl and sat near the hearth. "You could have let them take me," she said suddenly. "I wouldn't do that, even if it cost you everything." Elias looked at her, truly looked. Her features were tired, lips cracked, but her eyes were vivid, alive in a way Ruth had not been for months. "I don't know what it's already cost," he confessed, "but I'd do it again." The silence that followed was heavy, not uncomfortable, inevitable. Tayan leaned back against the wall, watching the flames dance. "I've slept under stars, in caves, in wind-carved rock. But this," she gestured around the cabin, "this is the first place I've felt still." Elias didn't answer. Words would only twist what they both knew. Outside, snow fell heavier. Inside, the fire burned low. And between them, something unspoken grew, fragile, dangerous, and real. The crossing. The wind shifted overnight. By dawn, the snow had eased into rain, cold, steady, and cleansing. Droplets traced lines down the cabin's window pane, gathering in rivulets that distorted the outside world into watercolors of gray and pine. Inside, Elias stood at the table, sharpening his skinning knife with practiced strokes. The rhythmic rasp of steel on stone was the only sound until Tayan entered, quiet as ever, with a bundle of fresh herbs she'd gathered from beneath the wet pines. She set them down gently, fingers brushing the wood near his. Neither looked up. "I used to dry these with my mother," she said, her voice soft but steady. She said they kept the darkness from settling in the chest. Elias glanced at the herbs, yarrow, sweetgrass, and something he didn't recognize. "You believe that?" "I believe some kinds of darkness don't leave easily." Their eyes met briefly. The unspoken lingered between them like smoke. Later, as the rain thickened, Elias and Tayan stood side by side under the lean-to behind the cabin. A deer carcass hung from a hook, freshly taken from the trap line. Elias made the first cuts with steady hands, and Tayan watched closely. When he paused to wipe his blade, she stepped forward. "Let me try." He handed her the knife, hesitant but willing. Her hands were careful, slow but sure. He guided her once, his fingers brushing hers. She didn't flinch. Neither pulled away. Rain pattered on the roof, soft and insistent. That evening, the fire crackled low as shadows lengthened. Tayan sat on the floor by the hearth, combing her hair with a bone-carved comb Elias had found in his late father's chest. Her long dark hair caught the light in waves. Elias, seated nearby, watched from the corner of his eye. "She would have made a good wife," Tayan said without turning. Elias knew who she meant. "She still could," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Tayan smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but not yours." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The air inside the cabin felt different now. Warmer, thicker, charged. Tayan stood and crossed the room slowly, every movement deliberate. She stopped in front of him, so close he could hear the catch in her breath. "I came here afraid," she whispered. "But now, I'm afraid to leave." Elias rose to his feet, heart pounding. "I don't want you to." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The kiss was inevitable. It began softly, like testing the surface of still water, but deepened quickly, urgent, aching. His hands framed her face. Her fingers tangled in his shirt. The storm outside swelled with the wind as the dam within them broke. They moved together to the bed. No words, no hesitation. The cabin became a world unto itself. Outside, the trees bent under the weight of the rain. Inside, they gave into a truth that had been building since the moment their eyes met in the snow. No faces were seen, only silhouettes. Hands, breath, firelight dancing over skin. The intimacy was quiet, sacred, desperate. Time unraveled in the hush of rain and heat. After, they lay in silence. Elias stared at the rafters, Tayan's head resting against his shoulder. Her fingers traced lazy circles on his chest, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "I never meant to betray him," she murmured. Elias exhaled, hollow. "I never meant to betray her." Guilt mingled with the warmth still lingering between them. The fire had not gone out, but its light flickered now, less fierce, more fragile. Tayan sat up, wrapped the blanket around her. "We crossed the line." Elias nodded slowly. "But I can't say I regret it." She looked at him then, eyes deep with conflict. "You should." He couldn't answer, and perhaps that was answer enough. The next morning came quietly. Tayan stood by the window, her back to him. Her braid was tight again, her posture poised. Whatever tenderness had passed between them was tucked away beneath layers of resolve. "We'll be found soon," she said. "If not by your people, then by mine." Elias laced his boots in silence. "Chaska won't forgive this," she added. "I wouldn't, if I were him." She turned, the final flicker of sorrow in her expression. Then we are both condemned. Elias stepped closer. There's still time to choose differently. No, Tayan said. That time passed with the rain. She moved toward the door, but paused. Her fingers touched the frame, gentle, remembering. Thank you, she said. For what? For not pretending this wasn't real. And then she was gone, vanishing into the mist and trees. Elias remained inside, the fire reduced to glowing coals. On the table, Ruth's unopened letter sat beside Tane's woven bracelet. He didn't reach for either. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world had changed. The reckoning. The morning sun broke through a curtain of pale mist, casting long golden beams across the frost-dusted clearing. Birds sang faintly, cautiously, as if sensing the tension that still lingered beneath the quiet. Elias stood at the woodpile, axe in hand, his breath forming short clouds in the crisp air. He had not slept, not truly. Each hour of the night had passed in fragments. Images of Tayan's touch, the echo of Ruth's silence, and the weight of all that had been lost. Behind him, hoofbeats. He turned before the first shout came. Chaska emerged from the trees, flanked by 3 riders in buckskin and feathers. Their faces were unreadable, but their approach was deliberate. No haste, no warning. Tayan walked behind them. Her chin was lifted, her hands bound to the wrist with rawhide. She didn't look at Elias. Not even once. Chaska dismounted with the quiet fury of a storm cloud. He surveyed Elias with contempt masked in stillness. A warrior's rage, held taut like a bowstring. You took what was mine, Chaska said, his voice low, even. Elias straightened, unarmed. She wasn't yours. Not in the way you think. A murmur passed through the men behind Chaska, but he raised a hand. His eyes never left Elias's. She bore my name, he said, and still you touched her. Tayan shifted slightly. Elias saw the movement, subtle, defensive, ready for consequence. She came to me, Elias said. She chose. Choice. Chaska laughed without mirth. We were not raised to believe in such things. She was duty. She was heritage. He stepped forward. And now, she is shame. Tayan finally looked at Elias. In her eyes, regret, resolve, and something close to peace. I'll go with them, she said softly. There's no other path now. Elias's jaw clenched. You don't have to. I do, she replied. I won't bring war between us. Between our people. Chaska turned to her. You will answer for what you've done. Tayan nodded. Without another word, she climbed onto one of the horses. The rawhide was cut. No one stopped her now. She was not a prisoner, only a sacrifice to a code older than love. The riders turned and disappeared into the trees, the silence returning like snowfall. Only Chaska remained. She is stronger than either of us, he said. Elias didn't reply. You should forget her. I won't, Elias whispered. Chaska nodded once. Then he, too, rode away. Days passed. Ruth's letter remained unopened on the table until the fire died low one evening. Elias finally tore the seal with a steady hand. Elias, I knew. From the moment I saw her beside your fire, I knew. I stayed quiet, not out of fear, but because I wanted to hear the truth from you. You never gave it. I loved you enough to wait. But love does not wait forever, not when it is not returned. You chose silence, and in doing so, you chose her. Goodbye, Ruth. Elias folded the letter with care and placed it inside a carved cedar box. Next to it lay Tayan's bracelet, woven with sinew and beads, a small circle that held a world of memory. Spring crept in slowly. The snow receded, the creek thawed, the trees turned from gray to green. Elias rebuilt the fence around the cabin, planted early beans, repaired the roof. His hands stayed busy. His mind wandered. He never saw Tayan again. But sometimes, late at night, he would stand by the window and imagine her among the hills. A silhouette against the moonlight. Free, perhaps, or still bound. He didn't know. What he did know was this. Nothing pure could stay untouched by consequence. Love, when stolen, left a mark too deep for time to erase. Yet even in the silence, even in the loss, He carried the memory of her voice, her presence, the warmth they shared when the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm within. One evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge and fireflies rose from the tall grass, Elias opened the cedar box once more. He held the bracelet in his palm, turned it over once. Then, without a word, he walked to the creek and let it go. It floated briefly, light, defiant, before the current took it. And still, he watched until it vanished into shadow.